Notice that the underlying theme behind all these presentations is same subject, same idea. The desire to change the world. And I personally have chosen to try to influence the world through a medium that you're all familiar with by now, the internet. By now, the internet reaches 40% of the world's population. That's 3,200 million people. And out of those 3,200 million, half of them at least are connected to at least one media platform. Back in 2009, a very celebrated TED Talk, Clay Shirky, a social media expert, likened this to a real revolution in thought. One of 4 revolutions, as in the history of mankind. That was back in 2009. We're reaching the end of 2015, and that wonderful revolution of thoughts and ideas has become this. Clickbait, memes, cute cats, false news, trolls, all sorts of stuff. It's kind of going away from that purpose. And I consider myself an internet activist. I've been connected to the internet since 1989, when I first connected to it, right across the street from here. I've been active in social media since 1991, at least. By 1995, I had prepared the first news resource in Puerto Rico in the World Wide Web. I was a news researcher and commentator for close to 4 or 5 years. And I've been at it all this time, but first and foremost, I'm an activist, an internet activist, and I've been at it for so long that I can tell you, and I spent literally half my life connected to the internet. It's getting harder to get your message across as time passes. And it's so because the whole dynamic of the internet has changed. And essentially, at the very beginning, if you can believe this, I've been called Puerto Rico's first blogger, not because I was special or anything, but because I had the technical know-how being from here to be able to, if you can believe it, hard code a blog by hand. It kind of shows my age, right? But the whole dynamics have changed. And if you want to do effective activism, you have to know your way through things. And I personally, believe I know a thing or two about this, and I come here to essentially tell you how it's done. Let me define that word activism for a second. Activism is, the action through which you, have a thought or an idea, and you want to persuade people into action concerning that topic. It could be a political or social subject. And, for those who have done activism, the people who have, gone to demonstrations, protests, the ones that have been sometimes arrested or even, face a water cannon or a taser. To them, this whole idea of activism through the internet is a bit lame. They believe that it's not, the real activism because, you don't spend your time, you're essentially spending your time behind a desk. And that to them is not very effective. But believe me, it can be effective because you can persuade people through the resources that you have at hand. You can go at it by yourself. You can try to do it all alone. You could also benefit from, networking with people who, have the same thoughts and ideas as you do, and eventually try to persuade other people to listen to what you have to tell them. Or you can, go to the right players, the people who do have the power and influence that you want to, reach, who will actually allow that change to happen for you. Let me give you an example. This is an example I tend to give. I guess some of you are familiar with this guy, Residente, right? Residente is the front man for Puerto Rico's music urban collective Calle 13. And René, I guess you're all, at least the people in this room are familiar with that. He wrote a song called Latino America. In Latino America, 30% of the lyrics of that song he wrote at the balcony of this guy's house. He's Gonzalo Larenas. He's from Chile. And among other things, Gonzalo Larenas is in the middle of a process to have people draft a new constitution for Chile through a wiki page. Essentially, you throw articles, you suggest, ideas that will be incorporated into constitutional text. You draft it, you discuss them, and the proposed draft will benefit from all this interaction. So ideally, that will make a more democratic regime for Chile if that ever gets to pass. So, from my work with Residente, I eventually, went to Santiago and Viña del Mar. Eventually, I visited Gonzalo. And by the time I came back to Puerto Rico, he had referred my name to who happens to be our mutual editor at a web platform that I write for, medioslentos.com. Her name is Luciana Maza. And Luciana lives in Argentina, and she's from Buenos Aires, and she's a Roman Catholic, and at some time in the past, she used to go regularly to church every Sunday, and she would befriend the priest over there. And it so happened that that priest got a promotion later on, so eventually she went to visit the guy. And you probably know this guy. Yeah, Pope Francis I. And by the way, if you take a look at the shirt that she's holding, there's our URL at the very bottom of that t-shirt. Luciana and Alicia Perezuti, you will see in the next slide, they have something that's very dear to their hearts, and it's a very pressing issue that in Puerto Rico we haven't even touched the surface of, which is human trafficking. And because of that, when they went to Rome and visited the Pope, they persuaded him to hold a piece of paper with a hashtag that says, Yo hago lío, I make a fuss. And eventually, that picture got associated with the Pope's Twitter account. Now, if you get the Pope to drive an issue on your behalf, if that's not effective internet activism, I don't know what is, right? So you can go at it, and in my case, I haven't had need for that, but if you realize I'm 3 degrees of separation away from the Pope. And I can tell you that he has read our blog, and I'm glad to say that he hasn't excommunicated me yet. But, back in the early days of the internet, I could easily do this. I had the technical know-how, and then it's a big change of paradigm since then. You could spend time trying to research, first of all, information that was available to you. There were no search engines, and the few ones that were there were a little quirky. You could get information and actually reach the right players, the people who, as long as they had an email account, you could actually reach them and persuade them directly. With time, everybody and his brother or her sister, they eventually got to this medium, and in came the influx of trolls, sock puppets. By any chance, do you know what a sock puppet is? A sock puppet is a single human being who has multiple identities in the web. And that person is essentially trying to persuade people, hey, there are many of us, and we all think alike. And you better believe what we're telling you because, there's a lot of us. Back in the day, you could, as long as you knew you were facing a sock puppet, you could, diffuse him by just throwing it, hey, you're trolling here, folks. I mean, and that person would be easily diffused. But by now, things are getting a bit different. Most of activism in the world is the result of a grassroots effort. And grassroots means, there are many, many people who think alike with you, and each one of them has a function, and they all essentially try to persuade the public at large to follow some train of thought. Well, grass is natural, but what we're facing now is that some corporate interests, even political parties do this, they essentially try to fake, well, I wouldn't say fake is too strong a word. They essentially try to simulate a grassroots effort by having people who are knowledgeable in media production and try to essentially give pretty much the same impression that, hey, there's a lot of us who think alike, and whatever you're proposing is not worth it. So it kind of counters, or will attempt to counter the effect of whatever campaign you're trying to do. And that's difficult, but not as difficult as we're facing nowadays. Any of you who have access to social media are probably facing this every day. Clickbait, for example. 10 quick ways to boost your IQ by 50 points. Guess what? It's not 10 clicks that you have to do. You do 14 or 15, and you click through the first 3, and out comes an advertisement. And then you click 3 more, and you get another advertisement. And by the end of that, you're essentially getting so little information for the effort that you're giving into it that is really not worth it. There was a presenter, a TED Talk presenter in the past, who likened, JP Rangaswamy, he likened information to food. And to me, this is like the Halloween candy of the internet. Memes. Who is Ted? Yeah, the overly attached girlfriend. Yeah. Yeah. Well, memes are effective. I've done hundreds of them, literally. But I haven't yet found a single meme that has changed the mindset of a person for good for his entire life. Maybe they'll shock you into, realizing or getting acquainted with some subject, but it really is not that permanent for you to get a big change in the world. Another thing that actually I'm pretty worried about is what they call native advertisement. You go to a news page, and because of licensing issues, I cannot show you a real news page doing that. You have real news, and you embedded between them, you had paid advertisements. And you click on that, and essentially you're either reading perhaps a real news item that was redacted in a way that's favorable to some interests, or you could even get a kind of distorted media item. And you only learn about that being native advertising because there's a little link at the very corner where you detect that, hey, this stuff is not real news, so to speak. So you face that, and you're bombarded by that, and all of a sudden you have millions and millions of people going through all these pieces of information, and they obviously feel a bit compelled to remove themselves from it all. They feel intoxicated. We call it infoxication, based on a term that was coined by a Catalan expert called Alphonse Cornellà, because it's the intoxication of information, or as they call it, information overload. And Clay Sharkey himself, when he was discussing this in the day, he said, well, there's no such thing as information overload. There's only media, filter failure. Well, you need one heck of a filter to go through here. What has worked for me, and what I suggest that you do if you want to do, activism in the internet, you have to focus. And essentially, it's taking that filter and turning it into a firewall. You have to learn how to, manage all that influx of information, and you as an activist, you have to focus, because otherwise your message will get lost. You engage people effectively, and social media platforms are great for this because, essentially you get to contact people directly. You talk to human beings. Obviously, there's a possibility that you may face a sock puppet or maybe somebody you don't want to contact, but there's your block filter for that. Your block list. And then you have to hack through mental filters, and the only way you can do it, if you're an effective activist, is you have to learn not only the topic you're supporting, the idea that you're trying to present to the world, but also opposite views to yours, and always hold the high ground. You cannot, be a troll, engage in a flame war. You remove yourself from flame wars if you ever, are brought into one. Most important thing of all, at least for me, and you've seen an example here, you build support networks worldwide with people who think just like you. And you can benefit from their experiences when you have had that chance, and they'll benefit from your experiences as well. And most importantly, if you all, you have to remember what brought you here. Change the world for the better. Guess what? When you get to see all this fluff, all this internet fluff that you're watching, people get overwhelmed by it, and they eventually remove themselves from it all. And the more they remove themselves from it, the less chance they have to act on that. And the interesting thing here is that, whoever is providing the fluff, the clickbait and all that, they're getting advertisement money for that, so they're not going to remove themselves from that. They thrive on advertisement money. But you as an activist, you thrive on two things: ideas and passion. And if you want to be effective, I personally have chosen, and I will choose to follow this path from now on, I'm going to become a meta-activist. I'm going to advocate for the people who advocate for things in the internet. My intention here is to ensure, that people, then don't get so overwhelmed by all of this that they don't even have a chance to think. I want to leave you with a parting thought, and it's probably from the most beloved Puerto Rican ever, Roberto Clemente, who himself gave his life when he had to, address a humanitarian emergency over in Nicaragua after an earthquake in 1972. And Roberto said, Anytime you have an opportunity to make a difference in this world and you don't, then you're wasting your time on earth. Believe me, every time you see a meme, every time you see a funny cat or a grumpy cat, every minute you spend clicking on fluff, extraneous information is 1 minute less that you get to influence and change the world. So I commend you that you do it. And if you want to, we can link up together and make sure that the internet becomes the true revolution in this world, the true revolution of ideas and thoughts that it was meant to be from the beginning. Thank you. Thanks for your time.